Hi, everyone. I think we have everyone admitted to the waiting room at this point, so I'm going to get started. My name is Pereira. I'm a supervising attorney at the Pennsylvania Utility Law Project. We're here today to talk about weatherization assistance and utility usage reduction in Northern Schuylkill County. So before I get started, just some preliminary kind of Zoom things. Feel free to chime in at any time with questions, concerns, thoughts. You can either go through the chat function. I believe Kelly has helpfully volunteered to keep track of that for us, or you can go ahead and just unmute yourself. And I will not be offended. I always love hearing other voices and thoughts. So my PowerPoint wants to work. There we go. So for those of you who are unfamiliar with us, we are the Pennsylvania Utility Law Project. We call ourselves PULP. We are a legal aid office that focuses on low-income residential utility and energy affordability in Pennsylvania. We represent low-income customers, specifically residential utility customers before the Pennsylvania Utility Commission, as well as other state agencies. And we also provide training, technical assistance, and support to legal aid and nonprofit community groups across the state. So we're here today to talk about a variety of programs. We're going to start out by discussing the importance of utility affordability and discuss a number of programs that I've listed here, some of which are going to be specific to individual utilities and some of which are going to be statewide programs. At the end of this presentation, we're going to have a section on COVID-19's continued impact on the utility arena in Pennsylvania, and we're going to have a quick update about the winter moratorium as well. So we often begin our presentations at PULP with a discussion of why utility affordability is important. So I've listed a variety of reasons here, and some of them are a little more obvious, such as utilities are connected to financial and economic stability of a household, as well as health and safety. If you don't have regular utility service, there is an impact on the overall health of the household. But some of the impacts of utilities and maintaining consistent and affordable service is less kind of known or often less stated, such as the ability to stay in a house, ability to keep public housing and specifically, as well as the ability to afford your overall bills, pay rent, and some impacts on the area of family law. Some of you might work in where the ability to keep custody, the ability to keep your children healthy as well. So some additional effects of utility terminations that we often see at PULP, leases terminated or evictions. As I mentioned, there are a variety of family effects, not only families being split up, but also issues with custody, depending on if there's a consistent issue of a household not being able to maintain utility services. We've kind of talked about health consequences, especially for older individuals. And this can be either physical health or psychological health from chronic stress of not being able to afford utility services, as well as, compounding bills and how that can cause stress, not only with utilities, but how utilities can affect the ability to afford other bills. So I do want to get a read of the room if any of you have worked with utility customers as your clients, if anyone's had experience where clients have told them they've had issues with utilities. Feel free to use the chat or unmute yourself. I'll give a second if anyone does want to share. Okay, well, I'm not immediately hearing anything. Those things might be coming in the chat, but feel free to share your experiences as we're kind of going through the presentation, because I'm interested to hear, what things are in your area of the state as well. So we're going to be talking about energy efficiency, weatherization in this presentation. I want to start out by just kind of giving you some terminology we often use. And the big term that we use when we're discussing energy affordability and usage reduction is energy burden. What is an energy burden? An energy burden is the percent of annual income that goes towards paying an energy bill. So essentially, how big is your bill compared to your income? Low-income households historically face a disproportionate energy burden in comparison to residential customers as a whole. And this can happen for a variety of reasons. Sometimes low-income customers do live in houses that need repairs and upgrades that affect energy efficiency. Sometimes you see larger family sizes that lead to higher usages. So you see that energy burden increase for the household as a whole. So one of the major goals of energy efficiency and usage reduction programs, as well as weatherization programs, is to reduce that overall energy burden, those energy bills, to get them reduced and essentially help the bottom line of the low-income household. So here's a general overview of the programs we're going to be talking through today. I'm not going to read everything on this slide because we are going to be going through this in detail. I just want to give you kind of a lay of the land. We're going to be talking about LIHEAP programs, which are the specific usage reduction programs through utilities. We're going to be talking about LIHEAP, but specifically LIHEAP Crisis Interface, which is going to be kind of that weatherization component of LIHEAP. We're going to be talking about Act 129 programs, which are programs that are, again, going to be utility specific. And we're going to describe how some of those might vary depending on what area you might be in of the state. And we're going to talk about the Weatherization Assistance Program, which is going to be a statewide program. So first, let's talk about LIHEAP, the Low Income Usage Reduction Programs. And like I said, this is going to be utility-specific programs. And because we're specifically talking about Schuylkill County, Northern Schuylkill County, as we're going through LIHEAP, we're going to give you some examples about how things might look in your area, depending on your specific customers. All right, so first, let's kind of put LIHEAP in the context of overall utility suites of services for low-income households. So all regulated larger utilities are going to be required to have universal service and energy conservation programs. These are those programs that are aimed at helping vulnerable customers, helping low-income customers maintain and afford services. LIHEAP is going to be one of those programs. You're also going to see customer assistance programs. I'm going to probably call them CAP as we go through this presentation, that are really aimed at bill discounts as well as normally arrearage forgiveness a lot of times. We're also going to be putting LIHEAP in the context of other programs such as hardship funds, hardship grants, and the name of some of these grants might vary depending if you're going to be in your area talking about PPL or UGI. And then there's another lesser known program I just wanted to point out that does exist normally with utilities. It's called CARES programs, Customer Assistance Referral and Evaluation Services, that really help to kind of connect with wraparound services. A lot of times these are kind of forgotten in the suite of these larger universal service programs. Would just be aware, if you are dealing with particularly vulnerable customers, that CARES programs, if available, might be invaluable. So let's talk more about LIHEAP specifically. So what is LIHEAP? What happens if a customer signs up or is interested in LIHEAP? So again, LIHEAP is really going to be that usage reduction program that's aimed at getting conservation measures into the household. What happens is that there will be an energy audit conducted generally. Some of this has changed to kind of virtual versus in person in the age of COVID. But generally, it does start with an energy audit, and depending on if education is necessary to help kind of put in some of those behavioral changes to get some of the usage down, that can kind of go hand in hand with that audit. And then really, LIHEAP is aimed at getting energy conservation measures into the household. Now, I've listed a number of measures here. I'm not going to read them in verbatim to you or anything like that, but be aware some of the big ticket items we sometimes see is heat pump repair, replacement of water heaters, heating equipment replacement. The other thing to kind of be aware of with LIHEAP is that they are allowed to go in and do what we call limited health and safety measures. So if, for example, a household has broken smoke or inoperable smoke or CO2 detectors or ventilation, they can fix some of that to really enable them to put in place and kind of get those usage conservation measures properly enacted, so you see those bills going down. So that's why we say it's a limited health and safety measures. And there might be a question. We do have a question from Sean. Is this something that consumers can request seasonally? Is there a time frame to request this? And Sean, if you don't mind clarifying, are you talking about LIHEAP programs?
Well, just the energy audit for someone to come in and look at their residents and try to give them some pointers. Is it something where they have to be behind on their bills for? Is it something they can just request or?
Yeah, and we're going to talk a little bit more about the specific requirements. A lot of times for CAP programs, they are required with a lot of utilities. Customers are required, if they're a CAP participant, to actually comply and participate in LIHEAP. Now, some of that has changed with the reluctance of people to let other people in their home with LIHEAP. So some of those requirements have kind of been suspended, but generally, some utilities do require kind of CAP participants to participate in LIHEAP, and the other kind of component is if you do have those high usage customers. A lot of times with LIHEAP, dependent on the utility, they might prioritize those customers or even require a certain kind of usage. And we're going to talk a little bit about PP&L and UGI, which are the two programs you're most likely to see in this area. Did that answer your question, Sean?
Yeah, I mean, it sounds to me like they have to be connected with some other program in order to do that, like the cap you said or something.
It's not necessarily the case. It's just normally if you're LIHEAP eligible, you normally will be eligible for other suites of services. And sometimes if you are CAP, you are going to essentially sometimes be required at non-COVID times to participate in some of these programs. So not necessarily that you are CAP, because as you're going to see, some of the LIHEAP income thresholds are a little higher sometimes than you see with CAP programs, but normally a lot of times they go hand in hand. Does that clarify that a little bit?
Yep, gives me more information. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. So I think if my slides want to cooperate again, there we go. So like I said, I wanted to give you guys some examples about eligibility requirements in specifically the areas you would work with. You're going to see a lot of PP&L customers, I'm guessing, in Northern Schuylkill County, and PP&L customers, LIHEAP, are going to be called RAP. So for the RAP program, there are certain eligibility requirements. Like I said, the eligibility for income is going to be a little bit higher than the CAP program. Income no greater than 200% FPL. It's going to be household income. For people who are tenants, because a lot of times the RAP, the LIHEAP program, will come in and make improvements or changes to the house. Landlord approval will be required. Again, like we talked about on the last slide with Sean's question, high usage, high arrear customers are prioritized. And you will see this again and again. A lot of the LIHEAP programs do have kind of a stability component that you have to have service for a certain period of time at a residence. For RAP, it's going to be 9 months at the same residence. And I have provided some contact information, and if you wanted, I should mention that these slides should be available through the chat. I think Kelly posted them. If anyone doesn't see it and is interested in getting a copy of the presentation, just ask. All right, so another example is UGI LIHEAP. So here's some of the eligibility requirements. Gas heating customers are going to be eligible for UGI LIHEAP. It's going to be income no greater than 150% FPL, but be aware that there is a 20% kind of carve out for households with income no greater than 200% FPL. Similar to PP&L, for tenants, there is going to be a requirement for landlord approval. And sort of similar to the PP&L requirement, instead of prioritization, UGI requires above average consumption. And this is going to be above average for residential customers. Now, service at residence for 1 year. So for UGI's LIHEAP, you're going to have a longer period of time required in the residence than PP&L's LIHEAP. And again, here's some more information links for those of you who are interested. All right, so is there any questions before I move on to LIHEAP about LIHEAP? Has anyone, if they want to share, worked with any LIHEAP customers? I'll pause for a brief second, so not to give too much dead air. Okay, well, I'm not hearing anything immediately, so I'm going to move on to LIHEAP, which, for those of you who are unfamiliar, is Low Income Home Energy Assistance Program. So I'm sure most of you are familiar, but really quickly for those of you who are not familiar with LIHEAP, this is a federally funded program that's administered through DHS. It assists low-income customers to pay for heat and heat-related services to their homes. So here's some general information about this LIHEAP season. This LIHEAP season is going to run April 9 to April 9 to 2021. And we're going to be talking specifically about crisis interface, but I did want to give people information about cash and crisis grants as well. The reason being that a lot of the eligibility requirements for cash and crisis are going to kind of also be eligibility requirements for crisis interface. So some of the general resident or eligibility requirements, I apologize, for LIHEAP is 100%, 50% FPL as your household income, a home heating responsibility, and Pennsylvania residency. We're going to talk about more specifically each of these requirements and what they mean in the next few slides, but these are kind of your general eligibility requirements for all kind of components of LIHEAP. And there'll be additional for which kind of subset of LIHEAP you're talking about as well. For those of you who want more information on crisis grants, I'm more than happy to share it. But just be aware for a crisis, it's going to require a crisis. It's going to require an actual or imminent home heating emergency that can be resolved with a crisis grant. Though DHS sometimes considers rule changes, this is definitely still a requirement that's on the books. So for those of you who are unfamiliar, I have put some information here about how to apply for LIHEAP. The most, I guess, user-friendly way is normally to apply online for people who do have access to the internet. We do encourage people who are able to apply online to do so because you receive a preliminary eligibility determination at the end of the application. Normally, you can apply through county assistance offices. Be aware during COVID-19, COAs most likely will be closed. How that progresses, we're not entirely sure, but drop boxes have been installed at the COAs to allow applications to be submitted. Social service providers and others can also request flyers, blank applications, and they do come in English and Spanish. So those who have applied early should have received a postcard. We're getting a little bit later into the winter season, but if you have clients who do have postcards, just be aware that might be why. They do have a hotline number that is still operable. The one tip we're giving people during COVID is because of kind of that Dropbox system that has been put in place. Make a copy of the application for people who don't have access to a copy machine. Just take a picture with a phone and just essentially see what you can save just in case there is an issue. So we're going to talk about cash and the requirements under LIHEAP cash grants, but I'm specifically going to mention that these are requirements you're going to see under crisis interface as well. So when I'm talking about it in the context of cash, keep in mind that you will have to show it in crisis interface as well. So like I mentioned, there is a income requirement where households have to have income at or below 150% FPL. And this can be measured either as the month before or 12 months before the application, whichever benefits the client, the customer. And the next requirement that I did mention under the kind of suite of LIHEAP, I apologize, is home heating responsibility. And this can be shown in a variety of ways. It can be shown as being responsible for a main source of heat through a utility bill. It can also be shown through a landlord verification or a lease showing responsibility for a main source of heat, obviously in the case of tenants. Now, in the case of tenants, just be aware of cash grants, you're going to get about 50% of that cash grant amount. Utility companies normally often go directly to the CAOs to verify heating responsibility. So residency requirement, again, we talk about it here, a cash grant, but keep in mind it is a crisis interface requirement as well. So household members must permanently reside in PA. We give this kind of little colorful exception. A lot of times where recreational vehicles may still qualify if their residents, their recreational vehicle actually resides in the licensed facility year round. We often get questions about LIHEAP in general and how and if immigrants and non-citizens can still be eligible for LIHEAP. And the answer is many times yes. Certain lawfully admitted non-citizens are still LIHEAP eligible, regardless of when they arrived in the United States. If you are an ineligible non-citizen immigrant, there is still a way for an eligible child or other member of the household to still be the LIHEAP applicant that can be the valid LIHEAP applicant, I should say. So for anyone who wants more information on kind of the intersection of immigration and LIHEAP, please do ask, because we sometimes do full presentations on this kind of stuff. So real quick note, because we did talk about LIHEAP income eligibility requirements, is that because of the continued COVID-19 pandemic, there has been some changes made to how and the extent to which customers, applicants do need to submit income documentation. So due to the pandemic, it's now possible to accept a client's statements as verification of income or household composition if they are unable to acquire the requested documentation. Third-party verification by a caseworker has not been possible, or the householders receiving other benefits that have already accepted the client's statement. So what this means in practicality is that if the customer, the client, is not able to obtain income documentation, ask the CAO to assist to obtain third-party verification. If that is not possible, request that the CAO accept the client's statements of self-verification as well. So LIHEAP Crisis, real quick, because most of these requirements we have talked about, you're going to have those same three requirements: household income requirement, the home heating responsibility requirement, and the residency in Pennsylvania requirement. In addition, for crisis, there has to be an actual or imminent household heating emergency that can be resolved with crisis funds. And this can be either with crisis funds alone or taken in conjunction with other funding, either grant funding through the utilities, maybe the customer, the applicant does have some stored up funds, so this often is less likely with low-income customers. So for those people who are helping people complete LIHEAP cash crisis grants, be aware that cash grants applications can be valid for cash and crisis. And the kind of practice tip we give people is that utilities often accept less than the total amount to resolve the crisis. You just do have to ask, and normally it takes a little bit of advocacy, especially if you're helping a customer out. So crisis interface, this is kind of the weatherization component that we're going to be talking about a little bit more in depth. The crisis interface component of LIHEAP is aimed to assist and help low-income households repair and replace inoperable or inadequate heating systems. So LIHEAP Crisis, again, will repair, replace broken or inoperable furnaces. So normally the process is that DHS will refer, if the applicant is found eligible for crisis interface, to the local weatherization office. For anyone who wants more information about references to weatherization offices, please let me know. The weatherization provider will then conduct a home visit and essentially perform appropriate remediation. So that could be either repair, replacement, or installation of additional weatherization measures to windows, things like that, to try to essentially remediate the immediate problem that the crisis interface grant has been granted for. So the practice or the timing tip is that the remedial action must be taken within an appropriate time frame. So that's going to be 48 hours or 18 hours in case of life-threatening situation. So this is really the crisis component of the crisis interface portion of LIHEAP. So some eligibility requirements of the crisis interface LIHEAP component is household income at or below 150% FPL. Home heating responsibility, again, we talked about how that can be shown in a variety of ways, including through lease terms in the case of tenants, Pennsylvania residency, similar to what we've talked about as well. In addition, crisis interface requires heating systems that need to be repaired or replaced. And the two kind of time frame tips for that is that that heating system must have been operable when the applicant moved in, and the heating system must also have been operable within the last 2 heating seasons, again speaking to kind of that crisis component of the crisis interface. In the case of tenants, like most of these programs we are talking about here, it does require landlord permission. Once the crisis interface kind of team has come in and done the work, however, there has to be an agreement that the landlord has to agree to not evict the tenant for a reasonable period of time or increase the rent for that tenant. And a reasonable period of time, you're generally going to see 18 months or more. So before we move on to Act 129 programs, do we have any questions about LIHEAP? Do we have any questions about LIHEAP Crisis Interface, or anyone who's utilized Crisis Interface either for themselves or their clients they're working with? I'll give it a minute again as to not give too much dead air. All right, well, I'm not hearing anything immediately. Just for those of you who've never kind of had experience with crisis interface, feel free to ask us if you do want more information. Some of the more kind of little nuances do become a little tricky, especially as you start overlapping some of these programs with LIHEAP, Crisis Interface, and Act 129. So definitely let us know. We're always here to provide more information, especially about LIHEAP. So Act 129 programs, we're kind of switching back to utility-specific programs, and these are going to vary by the utility because they are utility-specific programs. So what are Act 129 programs, essentially? Act 129 of 2008 was really put in place to reduce usage of electric utilities throughout Pennsylvania. So electric utilities must reduce usage in each sector. And this can be done in a variety of ways. It can be done through energy efficiency measures. It can be done through demand response measures. And this is really going to be aimed at usage curtailment during the peak hours of usage. But either way, electric utilities have an obligation to reduce overall usage by a certain percentage under Act 129. Now, how it generally works, because these are utility-specific programs, is the Pennsylvania Utility Commission sets savings targets and program parameters, and some of these can be goal targets in terms of energy efficiency reduction, or it can be program parameters related to multifamily kind of things. And then utilities have to submit a plan outlining how their specific Act 129 program will meet these requirements and will be beneficial for their specific customers. So there's a lot of kind of litigation history behind, I should say, Act 129. But for the purposes of this presentation, to not bog everyone down, just be aware that we are currently in what we call Phase 3 of Act 129. And obviously there was a Phase 1 and a Phase 2, but Phase 3 is really kind of progressing what's been done previously. So we, for our purposes here, probably just need to know a few kind of big ticket items to help the clients, the customers that you're working with. So the commission has set a 5.5% low income savings requirement. And what this translates to with the individual utilities is, those energy audits, those saving measures have to be put in place to kind of meet those goals that kind of cut out for low income savings. Now, some of these measures will be in the form of less long-term measures, we call them, like lighting replacement, lighting upgrades, but you will often see larger, kind of more big ticket enhancements. And what these are not only going to vary by utility, but they're going to vary by specifically like the customer's needs. So once that energy audit and kind of home evaluation is done, that list of measures that are going to be available is going to kind of be determined by those factors, what they find in those. So phase 3 has put an emphasis on direct install measures, especially to low income homes. And the caveat and the asterisk for your customers, your clients, is that some of these direct install measures come at low or no cost to the low income customers. Some do require some kind of cost sharing. So the important thing, if it is an Act 2129, is to ask if, there is any kind of cost sharing requirement. A portion of phase 3 has been required to be carved out also for MF, what we call multifamily programs. And these are going to be those larger kind of tenant or normally tenant occupied residences. But again, for your purposes, be aware that there's specific measures that have been put in place for multifamily programs. So, and again, the big caveat is the eligibility and measures are going to vary by utility. So before I go on, I know I went through kind of a lot of generalities with Act 29. Is there any specific questions anyone have about Act 29? Has anyone experienced any kind of work with Act 29? I think if I'm remembering correctly, PP&L did have a multifamily and MF project under Act 29 not too long ago in Schuylkill County. So I'm not sure if anyone had any experience with that, but I would love if you shared your experience if you did. I'll give it a second again. All right, so I haven't immediately heard anything, though I don't think I gave it very long, but if anyone wants to share anything, feel free to use the chat function. The kind of important takeaway with multifamily is that multifamily work is and has been done in Schuylkill County, and we encourage multifamily projects because it does help the overall energy efficiency of the area. All right, so moving on, the Weatherization Assistance Program, WIP. This is administered through DCED. The goal of this program is to increase energy efficiency in homes. Again, it's aimed at reducing energy costs and increasing the overall comfort of the home. Like some of these other programs we've talked about, there are kind of limited health and safety measures that can be done with the home specifically to allow those energy efficiency, measures to be put in place. Some of the available measures, I'm not going to read them all, but can include installation of insulation, heating system repair, replacement. Again, some limited health and safety measures. They might, come in and help with, some insulation, repair, replacement of CO2 meters. If there's a window that's broken, sometimes you'll see that as well. So WAP, some of the eligibility requirements you're going to see from that is you're going to see household income at or below 200% FPL. There is priority given to people who are more vulnerable, people who are a little bit older, disabled individuals, families with children, as well as high energy users. And for more information, I did post to the DCED page.
Rhea.
Yep.
This is Sean. Is there a long waiting list for this? And if because I've helped a couple people apply for this, but it's usually a long time till they get it.
Yeah.
Is there any way to move people? I mean, you help somebody apply for housing and there's certain preference points they get. I mean, when they apply for this, is there any way to help them boost up or?
Yeah, and I know this is a problem we sometimes run into ourselves. We do some advocacy work actually with WAP, and one of the kind of things we're working towards is kind of helping to see what we can do to streamline that. Though I'd love to give you better advice other than the fact that if you do have a customer who is specifically a vulnerable customer, sometimes priority can be given to them, like I mentioned. But unfortunately, it's a problem that we're aware of, that we do run into a lot. The other kind of advice I give with energy efficiency programs in general is, you can probably tell by this presentation, there's some utility specific programs. There's some programs that are administered through the state and our state programs in general. A lot of these are kind of overlapping programs that can, but sometimes don't always work in harmony with each other. Depending on what utility you're going to be working with, some utilities are better at least with the utility specific programs, of kind of funneling or channeling appropriate measures. So they go into the house, they conduct that energy audit, and then the goal is, or at least the goal we hope would be, to perform as much as the house to get them up to what we consider energy efficiency as possible, whether through the use of LIHEAP funds or other funding. So we always hope for better coordination within the utilities as well as with some of these other programs. Sometimes that doesn't always happen, but it's always if you're going to a utility specific program, it's always worth asking how, if you can tap some of these other utility specific programs. Does that make sense? I know I wasn't being overly articulate when I was explaining that.
Sean, it's Dave Young.
Hey, Dave.
It is, we have a referral list. It is one of the most sought after services that we have. We do try to coordinate with PPL for their RAP program. That's one of the LIHEAP programs that Rhea was discussing before. Unfortunately, the basic weatherization waiting list, we're not even allowed to call it a waiting list. It's more of a referral list. There's about 300 people that are still seeking out that service that haven't even been contacted for an application. There's just not enough resources to serve. Now we do partner with PPL a lot to help some of that, and if they're going through the weatherization program, we'll try to partner with the PPL RAP program to get the customer the most energy efficient measures that we can possibly get. And it also helps with that waiting list. Specifically, if you have a PPL customer that's income eligible, they can apply for RAP and Act 129 right on their website. Those are ways that'll help them go through the process a little quicker, especially if they have electric heat as their heating source. But other than that, it is typically a wait. I'd say it's about a year and a half before that contact is made to complete an application.
Thanks. Oh, go ahead.
I've helped people apply, but no one's gotten that while I've worked with them. But I mean, I have worked with people said, hey, I got the weatherization program years prior. So, but that is good information. Thank you.
Thanks, Dave, for that information. And the only thing I could say is that you and this area is not alone in this long referral list, for better or worse, and it's obviously for worse. But we're continuing to work and advocate to see if we can help with that. But yeah, it's a problem throughout Pennsylvania. But that's why, again, tapping some of these other programs, seeing if they can work in conjunction might be helpful. All right, so any other issues or questions or concerns about utility usage reduction, weatherization? Because I'm going to give you guys some information about what's going on with the current state of utilities and COVID-19, but I didn't want to cut short the kind of other component of this presentation. Okay. Well, not immediately hearing anything. I just wanted to let you guys know where we stood currently on the utility moratorium timeline. So most of you are probably aware of at least some component of this. On March 13th, the commission did prohibit those regulated electric, natural gas, water, wastewater, and telecommunication and steam utilities from terminating customer service based on the pandemic. Again, the key word I should say is regulated. The PMAA has issued some guidance for those unregulated utilities. Those are going to be your municipals, a lot of time municipal water authorities, but they're not under the jurisdiction of the commission. So after a period of comment on October 13th, the commission entered an order lifting the absolute ban on utility service terminations. They did allow terminations to begin as of November 9th and put in place what we call a phase 2 for protected customers. We're going to talk about a little bit what that means on the next few slides, but just be aware that we're officially in phase 2 now. So until March 31st, protected customers will essentially remain protected from termination, but they have to jump through a number of hoops, including applying for available assistance programs and requesting payment arrangements from the utilities. And I'm going to talk a little bit about what that means as well. So according to the October 13th order, there also has to be this additional notice, letters, communication, sometimes it's called different things, to the customer to inform them that they're at risk of termination, when they're terminated or when they might be terminated essentially, and what their available options are. So this is in addition to that 10-day termination notice. It has to be sent 10 days before sending that standard termination notice. So it's essentially an additional communication to the customer. So protected customer, again, they cannot be shut off for non-payment prior to March 31st. What is it? What are they? I should say residential customers, their income has to be no greater than 300% the FPL. And then in addition to meeting those two requirements, they have to request a payment arrangement from a utility and apply for all available assistance if eligible. So if the customer manages to do all that, the utilities must waive their late charges, reconnections, and deposit fees for protected customers as well. So just to give you guys a little bit of scope, what 200% FPL looks like, this is going to be that household income dependent on family size. That's that middle kind of column there. Depending on what area you are working in, this could be, you know, reasonable or not reasonable, depending on what area in Pennsylvania, but just be aware it is 200% throughout. So general advice to clients that we're giving who are at risk of shutoffs, if the customer thinks they're a protected customer, call the utility, provide the income information. You have to apply for the low-income assistance programs and hardship fund programs. Even if you have not received a notice letter from your utility that you have to do so, this is a requirement under the commission's kind of guidance. You have to request a payment arrangement, but for those of you who don't know, if you request and enter into a payment arrangement, you're admitting liability. You're essentially admitting that you do owe the amount you owe. So if there's a dispute as to the amount, you have to request, but you do not necessarily need to enter into a payment arrangement. So we generally give the advice, if you're at risk of termination, pay what you can when you can. This does establish what we call a good faith payment history with the utility. It helps you potentially qualify for other programs, grant funding, future payment arrangements. What happens when kind of negotiation and work with the utility falls through, as it sometimes does? If you are a protected customer, if you think you're a protected customer, and that you should have but are not being properly protected under the commission's regulations, you do have the ability to file a complaint. And then essentially it has to be at least 24 hours before the scheduled shut off normally is what we're seeing in order to stay termination. And because we are in LIHEAP season, if customers, clients do think that they are at risk of termination in the near future, see if they can apply for LIHEAP. So some specific utility kind of changes during COVID. PPNL's grant assistance program, Operation Help, has gotten approval to increase their eligibility kind of income ceiling from 200% to 250%. And that's right now allowed through December 31st of, I was going to say next year, but it's officially 2021, so it's this year. They are still waiving late fees and reconnection fees. As far as we know, this might change imminently as we continue in phase 2. So we're keeping an eye on that. And like we talked about LIHEAP and how some CAP customers in normal times are required to kind of participate in LIHEAP because of the obvious concerns of COVID-19. That kind of participation requirement has been stayed for now, though as things progress and LIHEAP is restarting in many areas, some of these kind of stops are going to be looked at. So UGI just recently went through a rate case. There's a number of kind of COVID-19 specific assistance, improvements, whatever you want to call it, that have kind of come out of that rate case. Some of these might take a little while to filter down, but I wanted to make you aware of some of them. Some of the big ticket items, I'm not going to read you this slide verbatim, but Operation Share, which is their hardship grant fund, has been increased to 250% FPL as your income eligibility ceiling. The maximum grant size has also been increased to $600. There's also additional kind of relief available for customers who have been newly unemployed or unemployed as a result of COVID-19. In order to qualify, you do have to provide some kind of proof of unemployment, benefits filed or received for one or more of the household members on or after March 13th, or proof that there has been a relief check in a certain amount. Benefits can include a one-time credit that will be determined as a portion of the customer's balance, and it kind of caps around $400, and then the suspension of collection efforts until essentially after, and I think that should say 2021, so I do apologize, that might have been my typo. So water assistance during COVID-19, I'm going to give, I know Dave's on the call, so I'm going to apologize if I get this wrong, because I'm going to give SCA a shout out, because SCA has indicated that there is limited grant funding available for water customers having trouble paying their water bills. Dave, is there any more information you'd like to give us with that? I'd hate to misstate what you'd want us to know.
No. If you have anybody that you work with or know anybody, have them contact our office. We are working right now on processing applications. Basically, we're providing direct vendor payments to the utility provider on behalf of the customer. We're tying them in with our budget counselor to help them get some financial education, free financial education help to help maybe help that customer better manage their expenses moving forward, so they wouldn't potentially need further assistance. But yeah, any customers you come in contact or clients you come in contact that are struggling with water, sewer, in some instances we help out with trash if that's included in those bills. Certain municipalities include those, so we'll help with that as well. So anybody interested, our number is 570-622-1995. The case manager handling that is a Sean. So there, I saw Sean was on the line. It's another Sean.
And Dave, is there an income eligibility cap on that? I can't remember.
Yes, it is. With the CSBG funds, typically that is 125%. That was actually increased to 200%, the federal poverty level. So it has a little higher income threshold. So we're able to help more people with that program.
Thank you, Dave. I figured I should not misstate your program. Thank you for the additional information.
Yep, no problem.
So as you can see, some local providers are providing limited water and wastewater assistance. The kind of distinction you want to make here, if you're looking at assistance through utilities, is that it's going to depend a lot. And if you're talking about one of those regulated water or wastewater utilities, or an unregulated, your municipals, a lot of times is what you're going to be talking about. And the larger regulated water companies, PA American Water is probably one you're going to see in your area, maybe Aqua, are going to have some limited additional assistance as a result of COVID-19. Some of this is fast progressing because some of these water companies are currently going through rate case litigation themselves. So in the next month or two, there might be increases or changes to that, dependent on the outcome of some of that. But those unregulated, you're going to normally find less assistance, but it's still worth asking if they have any additional COVID-19 assistance. So last thing I just want to kind of give people a reminder, heads up about is winter moratorium. We are still in winter moratorium. It's going to last till March 31st. And the March 31st date is not only important for the winter moratorium, it's also important because that COVID additional protections for those protected customers is going to, or at least it's set to expire on March 31st of this year as well. So that's a very important date for a number of reasons. So the winter moratorium, for those of you who are unfamiliar, are households with income at or below 250% FPL. They cannot be terminated for non-payment, or at least it's normally very difficult to. The additional requirements for some utilities, PGW is out in Philly, so unless you're dealing with a transplant in your area, you're probably not going to have too many experiences with utilities who have like that carve out that under 250%, but just be aware that if you are dealing with some transplants, some of the rules might vary. So termination notices issued during the winter moratorium cannot form the basis. That's a general rule for a crisis unless the commission grants approval to terminate. There is a wide exception made for notices dated on or after February 1st as adequate proof of crisis because it's acted on or after a moratorium ends. Now, some of this can and most likely will be affected as we get more information on that protected customer deadline or expiration, but these are kind of your general rules, and especially in a non-COVID environment to keep in mind. So we're kind of at the end of what I have for substantive information, but I wanted to just let everyone know that we have a number of resources available through PUB. We have advocate manuals, we have LIHEAP manuals. We are really kind of available to provide specific information for Schuylkill County as well. We work through the CRLA program in Northern Schuylkill County communities to kind of get resources out there. So if any of you have specific utility needs or needs of educational materials, things like that, I'm going to provide you my contact information in a second. Feel free to let us know. We also have a utility hotline, and here's the number, and we also have an email address. These, especially as we get closer to that March 31st date, we are expecting, unfortunately, expecting a flood of people who are going to be in need of utility assistance, especially low-income customers. We do put some income eligibility kind of requirements on taking in customers, but we are available for especially low-income customers. So does anyone have any questions about any of the presentation? Anything, any burning desires to share their experiences or thoughts? Well, the one thing I will say is that our general email is generally the easiest way to get to us. I have listed it here. We all have access to that email. So if any of you do have need for resources, you can either email, give us a call. We are working remotely, but we are very much still checking messages, still in the office. So I'd like to, with that, I'm pretty much done with my presentation. So unless anyone has any questions, I'd just like to thank everyone from attending. It's been a busy January, so thank you for taking the time out of your schedule to be with us here today, and let us know whatever you need. And we are here for your utility questions and needs in Pennsylvania. I'm going to hand it over to Kelly because she might have some wrapping up stuff, who's our helpful moderator.
The only thing I have is have a good weekend. Stay safe. Yep. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Stay safe, everyone. Happy weekend.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank